Welcome finally to the long overdue third video in this Australian Leyland Mini Restoration series. A lot has happened since our last video and we'll be following this one up with another very soon. But in this video we deal with bleeding the brakes on the car, replacing the wheel spacers and preparing the car for its rust repairs and trim work. We're going to use two methods to bleed the brakes. Firstly, using a one-man bleeder kit to get a lot of the air out of the lines. And then we're going to have someone help us by depressing the brake pedal while we unscrew the bleeder valve. Now before I get started, I'm just spraying the brake components with WD-40 to try and loosen everything up, and then we'll start by bleeding the furthest wheel from the master cylinder, which on a right-hand drive car here in Australia is the back left wheel. So I've got a full brake master cylinder which is full of fluid, so it's fine. And what we're going to do is use one of these self-bleeding kits. This one's made by Tool Pro, one-man brake bleeder. I've got spacers on these wheels, pretty chunky ones, and what I've just discovered is though there's not a lot of meat left on the end of these threads for the wheels, so I think I'm going to have to get longer studs to put on these. Anyway, that's another issue, but for the moment we're going to focus on working on these brakes and making sure fluid's getting right down to them. At the moment the brake pedal's sinking to the floor, there's hardly any pressure. Hopefully these cylinders aren't too badly seized. This car's been sitting for over a decade, and as you can see with the self-bleeder kit hose here, there's so much air coming through the lines. I originally started bleeding at the main master cylinder first, which is the best thing to do, and then you work your way around each of the brakes, starting at the furthest from the master cylinder. Depending on how long the car's been sitting, it can be a very big job, so just be patient and keep working at it until the lines run clear. So we're looking at the front brakes here, and this is the little bleeder valve that I've got a spanner on at the moment, and that is a 10mm on this little bleeder valve here. And the way we do this is usually if you've got someone else, which we do have someone sitting in the car at the moment, you get them to depress the brake pedal fully, and then you release the valve to let all of the air and some of the fluid come through the lines, and you do that until you start to feel some more back pressure in the brake pedal. So we'll start that process now, and you'll be able to see a bit of air and liquid start to come through the lines. And the idea is you want to get all the air out of the lines, because obviously your brakes aren't going to be working properly or compressing properly with air in the lines, and this car has sat for so long, and that's why we've got this issue of all the air in the lines. So if you could press down the brake pedal fully. Okay, undo this and we can see the liquid come through, and then okay, let it up and press down again. Tighten it, now let it up and press down again. Still got some bubbles coming through here. Okay, let it up and press down again. Still air bubbles coming through, so we'll keep going and let it up and press down again. Right, now that we've gone around each of the brakes in the car, the pedal previously was going all the way to the floor with no pressure. Now we've got plenty of pressure in the brakes, which is really good, and we've tested them up and down the driveway here and they work well, so we're good to go and move on to the next thing. I just want to show you here an issue I had with the spacers that were on the car. These were these huge spacers, about an inch in thickness. I've since purchased these thinner ones, and the reason being, by the time I had these on, and with these particular wheels, I had maybe 3 or 4 threads at best holding on the wheel studs. That's obviously sketchy, and it's much safer if you can get at least sort of 8 to 10 threads or more. The more the better. The way I'm thinking about the styling of the car, I actually think I'm going to leave it as is. Now I don't intend to put flares on it later, so I just want to leave it as it is, sort of sitting like that, and that's pretty much in line with the body, maybe slightly out at the back just because of the way the mini wheel sits there and the way the body curves around the back. I think this looks pretty good. Now compare that, so that's with the new spacer and just a single one of those new spacers, and I think these are just a centimetre. Yeah, they're just a centimetre thick. I could double up, but I think I'm just going to leave it. If I compare that to the previous full inch spacers, now they definitely need flares because they stick right out, but again, as I said, it's dangerous to drive with those if the wheel studs are only held on by 3 or 4 threads. I never drove the car with these wheels on them other than up and down the driveway here, and I wouldn't take it out on the road if I had those big spacers with only 3 or 4 threads holding on the wheels. So these should be a lot safer, and we'll be able to take it to the mechanic or wherever we need to go, knowing that it's a bit safer to drive. So this is the new stance for the car. I think it looks pretty good. The track is not too wide, but yet the car still doesn't look top heavy with the wheels too far inside the guards. So I'm pretty happy with the way this has turned out. One problem I had under the car was that the exhaust mounts, 2 of them, had actually broken in 2 places. One at the rear here, the weld had cracked, and one about a third of the way down the car attaching to the subframe had also cracked. And the problem is, of course, the welds under pressure with the vibration and things, they end up cracking. So I've just made my own little exhaust mount temporarily, at least. I've got these angle brackets from Bunnings, and I've been able to shape them to basically the shape of the subframe, as you can see, and I've got 3 bolts holding it in. It's probably stronger than any of the original exhaust mounts, and then I've got a thin piece of rubber just running between that, and I'll put some washers and also some lock nuts on those to keep it tight. But I think that actually should do pretty well in the long run, and it'll probably be better than a standard exhaust mount, if I'm honest. So here's a closer look at the bracket that I've made for the exhaust to mount onto the rear subframe, right near the exhaust tip. So you've got some large washers on top, stainless steel bolts, nuts and lock washers, and this is just, as I said, an L bracket from Bunnings, so those 3 mounting points should do pretty well, plenty of strength. So now I've got to work out what I'm going to do for the other exhaust mount, the one that's further down at the front of the rear subframe. The issue I have there is mounting anything other than a standard exhaust hanger from that position is difficult, because you've got the handbrake and the handbrake cables that come through the middle and then go out from there, so you can't just bolt things into the subframe like I have done at the end with this one. So it's going to be a bit different, or a bit difficult at least, but at least this N1 is up and very strong. So next we'll work on sorting the other one out. You can probably see there on the left is where the forward mounted exhaust hanger is, right in the middle of the subframe at the top there, and you can see how the weld has just snapped, so I've got to work something out for that. So because the next episode we are dealing with the rust repairs, it's time to first identify where the rust is in this car, and there is a fair bit of it, certainly a bit more than I had expected, particularly in the sills. So we went over the car in the areas of concern with a wire brush on a drill just to identify where the rust was, and as you can see here, we turned up a fair bit. So we've taken a wire brush to the car, and it's turned up a lot more rust than I expected, particularly in the sills. Inside here, you can see light coming through the other side. Quite a bit of rust in the corner and things, but could be worse. And of course, same on this side of the sill, rust down there. Rust all inside there, you can see through again. So I've cleaned it up a little bit with the wire brush and the drill. And of course, back here it often goes as well. There's a bit of rust there. Back into the sills themselves weren't too bad. I remember this old spot that I've got to fix here on the corner. So I've got rid of all the filler there. Around the other side. This one's really bad. You can see through the whole thing there. Pretty terrible. And of course lots of little holes all the way along. And again, the back corner. So that's really what we're going to focus on fixing, just for the sake of getting this car in a safe, registerable condition, really. That's about it for this episode, but as I speak, we've actually sent off our trim to get retrimmed, and you can see that here, the blue LS trim, original trim that we had in the car, and these new door cards we managed to pick up, we'll get them retrimmed in the colour that we want. But you can see these old seats here are fairly worn, even worse on the back seats, which have never been touched. You can see the trim starting to split there. Not so great, so we're going to get them trimmed in a colour of our choice. We've got to speak with a motor trimmer about that, and in the next episode we will show you the result of that, and including these door cards here. In addition to the trim, in the next episode we'll also see the result of the rust repairs that we've had undertaken to the car. We've sent it off to a panel beater and had all new sills welded in, floors, and including the boot floor as well, and all these little bits tidied up. And then we'll be taking the next steps to hopefully get the car tuned and back on the road and the trim installed. So there's been some serious progress, and we'll have that video ready very soon. Thanks very much for watching.